Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. So I really appreciate how this episode was done. It was done in a very interesting way where it's kind of like, okay, like you see both sides of the story. You see VIDS, Coulson, as well as Robbie, like being in the other world, the kind of the in-between dimension, and then you see the rest of everyone else on the other, like in this reality, and this is kind of interesting. Like first it shows like, oh, the fact is like everyone finding out like, oh, everyone's going, it's like, oh, are they alive, are they dead? But then you like get the same scenes replayed from a different perspective, where you end up finding out a lot more information, like the whole situation with Jeffries, because Fitz was there kind of eavesdropping. He ended up picking up some information that we otherwise didn't know. Because the moment he was telling Maid is like, oh yeah, don't worry, Simmons is on her way. Like it's going to take a little while. I was like, you're so full of crap. I was kind of hoping Maid would call him out for it, but it's like, what reason would she have to call him out for? But I was like, nah, he's so full of crap. I was like, he knows exactly where she is. Like, there's no way he contacted her because they would have pointed that out. It's like, no, because she would have came immediately. She would have dropped doing what she's doing. But it turns out, apparently, the person that sent her off, like that whole thing, that assignment wasn't for Jeffries. It wasn't for S.h.i.e.L.D. It was for the senator lady, because basically it's the way to kind of keep her hush hush about the whole situation with when S.h.i.e.L.D., when Coulson and as well as Daisy and Robbie were in the prison and everything, especially when Robbie ended up killing that gang member, like that, to keep that out of the media, because it's like he's trying to rebuild S.h.i.e.L.D.'s reputation, and it's like if that gets out, then it kind of tarnishes, the reputation that they've tried so hard to kind of build up. But it's like they kind of go back to square one, and I mean there might not be a second chance for S.h.i.e.L.D. after this, since this is like their second chance. So. But finding that out, like I said, it's one of those situations where it's kind of like you still don't know where he stands. It does seem, because in the beginning it's kind of like, oh, it seems like he's a good guy because he's not pushing the whole Daisy situation anymore. He's like, hey, in fact is we got some falling comrades. Let's be respectful. Send it off to their parents. It's like, hey, we can't go into this hot-headed. The fact is we got to know more about Eli before we go ahead, because it's like we'll go in blind, we'll easily end up dead. So. It was just kind of, like I said, his character is very interesting, because like it's hard to say when it's all said and done where his alliances stand. It's like, obviously it seems like it's with S.h.i.e.L.D., but as we know, Gemma kind of points it out, there is a little, like the episode she kind of called him out for, there's basically some discrepancies with why he's kind of, one of the things that led to him being considered a hero. In fact, Gemma kind of points out that there's more to it. Now, I'm wondering, I brought it up then, like I can't remember exactly what I said because it's been a while, but I'm trying to remember whether I brought it up or not. Doesn't matter. Like the fact is it something only Gemma knows? Or it doesn't seem like something everyone else knows, because I feel like everyone else would kind of throw that in his face. So it must be something, because she's his right hand person, she kind of has access to a lot of information, so she probably has more dirt on him than anyone else would, especially because Gemma said the reason why she took that job was to make sure that everyone else was safe. Because a big thing that came up in this episode was a conversation between Coulson and Fitz about the whole Ida situation, because that came out. Everyone kind of found out at the same time. Coulson found out at the same time that May ended up finding out, and it was kind of like, well, how can you do this? It's not right. You wouldn't do something like that. But he's like, well, you can't really judge me on that because you're not in control anymore. You can't really give me orders. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants here. It's kind of like we're the ones that kind of I have to make that decision, and I did make that decision. He's like, because he knows like the backlash it could cause Fitz. It could cause him to get kicked out of S.h.i.e.L.D. and stuff like that. That's kind of the whole reason why they were talking about like Radcliffe not to be doing that, because he knew it went against his agreement, to not kind of do stuff like that anymore. But but Fitz brings it up to Coulson's like, the fact is you walked away, you quit, mainly because he kind of brings it up because Coulson hasn't talked about it. And I was always curious, like, what was his main reason for quitting? And it does seem like his reasons kind of work alongside of Daisy, because it seems that Lincoln dying did something to him, because I guess for him it's like he lost an ally, and because more so than anything, that whole series of events happened because he went out of his way for revenge. Because he killed Ward, it allowed Hive to possess his body and come back. And it's like, if he wasn't so dead set on revenge, that Lincoln was a byproduct of his revenge, and Lincoln had to be the hero and sacrifice himself for Coulson's mistake. He didn't go that far, but you can kind of put two and two together, just kind of like the whole, like him and Daisy are punishing themselves for the same thing. And Coulson kind of gives this example of being like, oh, the reason why he backed down is because the president wasn't all too happy about the way the team was shaping up, all these power people on his team, and just the way he was operating things. Yes, that played a big part, but it's almost like you're you, dude. Like, you've come across many things in the past. You always fought. You stood up for what you believed in. You always fought. It's like, he said that the reason why he backed down was for their sake as well, so that they could keep working at S.h.i.e.L.D. That's why he did what he did, but at the end of the day, he kind of ran away the same as Daisy. And it's like he left them fighting. It's like they're the ones that kind of had to be back there picking up the pieces when they kind of left. They said, yes, you're there and everything, but you're not there as the leader to kind of help push things along. I mean, when you actually look at the entire situation and you look at Jeffries and stuff like that, it's kind of like you might not have always made the right decision and whatnot. I get, like I said, you don't trust yourself, but it does beg the question. You still have to consider maybe you're actually better off than Jeffries is. I mean, because that's, like I said, we still don't know where he stands in all of this. But it was interesting seeing kind of a different side to May in this episode. Like, normally May's the more calm, cool, and collected person, but the fact is that Coulson's in this situation. It just kind of drove her. It's like, no, I'm not about to give up on him, because Daisy was the one that was kind of like, okay, like, we can't just assume they're dead because everyone's thinking they're dead. But, Daisy kind of is like, no. It kind of inspired, because at first May was kind of like, no, they're dead. We just have to accept it. She didn't want to accept it. Definitely couldn't accept it because she actually held on to the Darkhold and was going to use it. Mac is like, yo, that's a bad idea. And even Coulson in his situation was like, no, that's a bad idea. But, for her, it was all about getting Coulson back, because it's like, I guess because May has lost so much in her life, all right? She lost Andrew, got him back her life, and lost him again. So I guess Coulson's kind of one of the last things in her life that she can hold on to. And it's like she doesn't want to kind of let that go. Like I said, that's always been kind of the thing. Like, maybe there's something between her and Coulson, but I mean, I'd like it if there was, but more so than anything, I think what it comes down to is the fact is that, like I said, that's kind of the last, like, rock she has left to hold on to kind of keep herself stable, to keep herself going, Coulson's the one that kind of pulled her back into this job. Like, she was working behind the desk until he called her up to be part of this team back in season 1, so I kind of didn't even talk about it much because he was only in an episode for a little bit, but kind of getting to see Eli's power. Is that, like I said, it's kind of like make something out of nothing. He had that little carbon spike in his hand, and then like those S.h.i.E.L.D. agents tell him to drop it, he drops it, and all of a sudden it shatters on the ground, and then all of a sudden spikes, like carbon spikes, seem to kind of come out of their bodies. So was he kind of psyching them out, making them notice that, and just popping it into their body? I don't know. Still pretty wicked. And then he's walking away, he creates like that carbon wall, just kind of show you just how powerful he is, kind of bending the world to his own will. Like I said, I brought it up before. I was wondering, like, because I mean, we probably won't see it until maybe later on in the season, but I'll kind of get to that in a little bit. But it's like the whole magic aspect of things, like, this is kind of in the aftermath of Doctor Strange. Now, whether that's really taking part in this, like, events, it's like he's have this power to bend reality. Yes, it's coming from a very science fictional point of view, but the fact is that magic has been introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that means it kind of trickled down into this show as well. But whether they really kind of taken that step forward, because like I said, this show still explains magic and gods as aliens and science that we just don't understand yet. So I don't know. But it was just kind of interesting seeing like this whole situation where Fitz, Coulson, and Robbie are in that world, and basically they're in a different situation than Lucy and them, because Lucy and them could actually interact with the world. They can to a small degree, but it's because they're deeper. Like, they're on the other side of that world. They're a lot closer to the darkness there. So I guess in Lucy and them's case, they were a little closer to the normal reality, so that's why they could interact with it to a small degree, or, eventually to a greater degree, but still. And then basically the entire episode, there's this darkness kind of creeping up on them, because eventually it will kill them. And it seems more so than anything, it really affects Robbie, more specifically the writer, to the point that the writer was like, no, I'm not going to like go down like this. So he actually leaves Robbie's body and goes into Mac, which was pretty cool. 'Cause I was wondering, I was like, I was like, huh, that's so interesting. Max driving off. I was like, in fact, he's on a bike and everything. I'm like, huh, kind of looks like almost kind of reminds me of the writer. And then and then you saw what was happening. It's like, oh, because he actually is the writer at that time he was driving away. I was like, that's pretty interesting because this is kind of our first time really getting like to see like the writer, like, even the writer himself pointed out, it's like this, I've always been that voice in your head, but this time we get to have a face-to-face conversation. And it's like, because this is our first time getting to see the writer's will of its own. Like, obviously, you could argue, like, the writer's always kind of done what he's always wanted to do, but you could argue at the same time, it's, like, hard to distinguish whether that was him or whether that was Robbie. Was it just acting upon Robbie's will or its own will? Because it is, reenacting Robbie's revenge. So maybe there's something more to it than that. Like, maybe there was a little bit of it doing that. Maybe it's some of its will, but at the very least, this is kind of our first time really getting to hear it talk, to really kind of 100% it being itself. That basically it's like, I can't trust you. You're sinking into the darkness. He's basically like, I've been there before, and kind of pulled himself back. And he's like, he's not going back. And then, he's like, the fact of the matter is revenge is heavy in Robbie's heart. But he's like, I can't do anything about it. You're in that world. He's like, I'm here. Mac's not the most suitable host, but at the very least, there's pain in his heart, which is kind of like, Daisy kind of brings that up. It's like, he was like, you had a lot of pain. He's like, oh, it's nothing. What we do see later on is him holding a picture that kind of says '06 on the back. So it makes me wonder, did Mac have a child or something that might have passed away or something? Like, because that's, whatever it is, it seems like something about Mac we don't know. Maybe it was something Hunter and Bobby knew about him, because, like, out of anybody, they knew him the best because they've known him the longest. So, I don't know. I'm sure we'll kind of get answers to that eventually, but it just begs the question. Like I said, it's not unless it was a different, like a family member or something. Like, maybe him and his brother had a sister in the past. I don't remember that really being brought up. Granted, I don't remember his brother ever being brought up until, his brother actually popped up in the show. So maybe he had a sibling that died some time ago, or, like I said, maybe a kid, maybe just a family member, whatever the case may be. Whatever it is, it affects him deeply, to the point that the writer felt like, hey, he doesn't have a lot of hatred and revenge in his heart, but at the very least, I can feed off the, like, tons of pain in his heart. So Robbie ends up striking a deal with the writer, saying, like, help me stop Eli, get one last bit of my revenge, because it's like, at the end of it all, everything happened because of Eli. What happened to him and Gabe happened because of Eli, because Eli started all of this, because being so obsessed with power. So it's like, I got to do one last thing. And then he's like, at the end of it all, he's like, I will be yours. He's like, the deal is, once you help me get my revenge, I'll help you get yours, which is kind of like, what is the writer's revenge? Like, that's good. That's going to be interesting finding that out. So I guess really what we'll see is more so like, now, the question is, will he be Robbie anymore, or will he be 100% the Ghost Rider? Is that kind of what we're kind of leaning towards? Like, hey, the moment's all said and done, he's going to be 100% Ghost Rider. There might not be any of Robbie left inside. Or are we going to be like, the fact is that Robbie's still in control, but he still has to help the writer do what he needs to do. Or, like, the very least, the writer will be in control more often than Robbie is. So, the balance inside of the body is kind of off kilter. It leans more towards the writer at that point than it does Robbie. I don't know. We'll just kind of have to wait to see. Because he kind of went to hell momentarily before coming back. And so, like, he's asking Mac for help. So it makes you wonder, because the writer was inside of Mac, does that mean that Robbie kind of knows what Mac might be hiding to? Because, like, the ghost kind of sensed what was in Mac, knows what was in Mac, what made him the way he is, and now he's back in Robbie. Maybe it kind of shared that information with him unknowingly. It just might be kind of a byproduct, not like he asked him, but maybe that's just kind of a side effect. So, but then you have that whole situation with Ida. Obviously, she's reading the dark hole because she's an android, so her brain can process it, because a normal human being can't. Because Radcliffe, I was like, oh man, this is a bad idea, opening a book, and he's opening a book. I was like, oh, this is bad. And then Radcliffe did an amazing thing where he closed it immediately. It was kind of like, no, we can't do this. But May's like, no, we have to. It then kind of brings up, the android aspect, and she was able to read it, and basically she ended up creating a portal to that dimension that they were in, and it's just like, what is she doing? And even Fitz himself is like, I'm not even going to pretend to understand exactly what she's doing. And plus, at the end of the episode too, like, after they were able to bring them back, which is another, well, I'll get to that, but it's like, we see this whole thing about her kind of shaping a brain. Now, does that mean she's kind of overtaken by the dark hole? I mean, normally, like, the dark hole would kind of drive someone crazy with all the information that's being pumped into their brain. But obviously, she can compartmentalize and handle it just because of her brain being an android. But it makes you wonder, do you think Ida might be trying to turn herself human? Maybe that's what she pulled from the dark hole, or what means of making herself a human body. Maybe that brain was a brain she's trying to create for herself because she wants a real body. She doesn't want to be an android anymore. She wants to be human. I mean, maybe that's the case, or maybe it's something else. That's kind of the first thing that went to my mind, because her whole programming is kind of like, hey, we're going to be, you have to be the shield for everyone, kind of like, because Fitz was like, kind of what Radcliffe brought up, and it's kind of something Fitz believed in too. It's like not losing anyone that they care about anymore. Like, losing Lincoln didn't just affect Daisy and Coulson. It also affected the rest of the team too, in their case of just like, he never wanted that to ever happen to someone else that they care about again. So, and a very interesting thing too is about what Gemma was off doing for the senator. So apparently she was looking into, because I almost completely forgot about it. There was that Teragenesis person that was going through Teragenesis in her house. Like, the moment we found out is like, oh, she was kind of behind the watchdogs and stuff like that, because she's actually a bad person manipulating a lot of people. But we ended up seeing someone stuck in that statue, and I was like, who could that be? I was like, I completely forgot about that until this pod. I was like, right, that's why she would be asking, because apparently this person has been stuck in Teragenesis for 7 months, when it's usually like a pretty quick thing. It's like, that's why they're never, because you never really get to see it firsthand, because it's usually over by the time you find out about it. But it's like, this person's been stuck in there for 7 months, and Gemma kind of talks to him and gets to, like, not really know him because his name is classified, which makes me wonder, like, the fact is that he's in our house means means something to the senator, whether that's her husband or something. Like, he has some kind of connection to her, and it's like, for what purpose? Because the question wasn't who he was, the question is, what was he going to turn into? Because, it was brought up last time, and it kind of, you gotta remember that with, when it comes to Inhumans exist for a balance. They represent some kind of cosmic balance, that, there's always an equal balance to everything. That's like, to keep from one power, for example, one Inhuman's powers being more powerful than another power exists to kind of counteract that, to always keep balance in the universe, keep everything, the whole yin and yang, good and evil type of situation. So it's like, what could his power be? What could he be balancing, Because we barely even got to see a face before Gemma was taken away, because it's like, oh, because she was able to like pull off the shell, and it's because he basically was still alive the entire time, and his heart rate was increasing, but Gemma kind of was able to calm him down by talking to him, because even in that state he could hear her. So hopefully we kind of get some answers to that soon enough too. So overall, a crazy episode, a very good episode. Like I said, I cannot help bringing up the fact is, I really like this episode. It was interestingly done how they did things. They could have probably easily just kind of went back and forth, but I think for the purposes of like, hey, they're giving you the overall story with one reality, and they're kind of filling in some blanks, some stuff that you might not know. Like, because the whole point is like, for instance, Fitz, like, knowing what he knows, he confronted Jeffries. He didn't get to go through his entire thought because Gemma came back. Makes you wonder what he's going to do with that, because Coulson also knows about that too now. So what's that going to mean going forward? Will Gemma say anything to them? Will he tell Gemma what he found out about from Jeffries? Will they act upon it? That type of situation. Like, at the end of the day, can he be trusted? Because the fact of the matter is, yes, he's doing this for the sake of S.h.i.e.L.D. and whatnot, but he still could have handled that situation a little bit better. Because the fact of the matter is, I doubt Coulson would have handled that situation, because it would mean compromising keep putting one of the people he cares about, Gemma, in a situation where he wouldn't know exactly where she was. Because even Jeffries himself didn't know where she was. The senator wasn't going to tell him. So it's kind of like, Coulson would have never put her in a situation like that. I mean, like, I believe she would. At least I believe he wouldn't. So, and another thing I was going to bring up, was about Robbie himself. Is like, the fact is that he came back through the portal. Now, was that something he could, like, did he just know that the portal was there and went to find it, or is it, what? Because at first I was wondering, because it doesn't seem like, because the writer itself can seem to pull itself from that reality, because it's like, I guess as long as it's not bound to a body, it kind of has more like move it like more room to wiggle through. So maybe he was able to pull through because of the writer. I mean, like I said, because the gates open, so I guess they were able to find that weak spot that he could punch through. So I mean, that's kind of how I'm chalking it up. Like I said, still a very good episode. I'm very interested to see where it goes from here. Next week is the winter finale, so literally came back for 2 episodes to take another break. So it probably won't be till. I mean, we'll have to wait till next episode to find out when it is. But it does seem like we're going up against Eli, and it's like, how do you fight? Like, I mean, the thing is, can even the writer handle something like Eli in the state that he's in? Like, how is this all going to play out? What is it that Eli ultimately wants? Obviously, he wants power, but what does he plan to do with it? So many questions, and super excited to find out. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.